Okay, you're all set.
Thank you. 6.0, reconvene open session. 6.1, call to order. The Board of Trustees are hereby reconvening open session at
5:12.
5:12. Thank you. 5:12 p.m. 6.2, roll call. Trustees to identify themselves by first and last name to formally establish quorum. Natalie Lindeman, trustee area 4.
Bill Mellinger, trustee area 1.
Dana Ridlin, trustee area 2.
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5.
7.0, closed session report. 7.1, announcement of reportable actions taken during closed session. We have none. 8.0, public testimony. At this time, we don't have any public testimony, but we may get one at 5:30. So we will come back to that per the current policies. 8.3, or excuse me, 8.2, again, no comments at this time. 8.3, RTA and CSEA representatives. There are none at this time. 9.0, reports and presentations. 9.1, setting direction. CSBA, California School Board Association Conference Report, Board of Trustees. I will go ahead and ask that Bill starts us off with that.
Okay, since I haven't done this before, Natalie, just tell me how much so how many
No
sessions?
worries. Yeah,
Whatever
so
okay.
I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry. So typically what we do is we just let people know that our school board attended the CSBA conference, and each board member presents out on any of the things that they attended that they feel like is relevant for our district, that they would like to share, maybe new ideas, things that they learned that they think would be neat to implement in the district, anything like that. So it's just really a report out of those breakout sessions that you attended. Maybe general feelings about the conference too are appropriate. Just everything focused on the conference.
And Bill, because it's a workshop, it's more discussion based. So any of us can jump in and ask questions, about something you said or about a particular workshop, or we can join, or as Natalie said, if it's a new idea, we can have discussion on it. We can't take any action because it's a workshop, but it's a conversation as well.
All right, good. So I can say, I don't know.
Yes, you may.
Okay. So I think we probably all did this in selecting some of the workshops that were of concern or interest to us. So the first one I'm going to mention is the mental health workshop, because I've been concerned about the mental health of and I thought I really appreciated that they began with the statement, something to this effect, that we need to all be thinking of staff and students. Everybody is struggling with mental health issues. We've talked and been concerned about our staff. And when we say staff, we're talking about everyone from our superintendent, right, to every teacher, to every classroom assistant, to every aide, to every cafeteria worker, every bus driver. I mean, I can't name them all. Secretaries, attendance workers, nurses, everybody, parents. Everybody is under stress and struggling with mental health issues. And I think all of us and our whole community, as well as our whole school community, needs to be aware that everyone is struggling with that, and that we all have a role in trying to work towards connectedness. They use 3 words. To provide a sense of safety, we need to work towards connectedness, balance, and hope. And that involves people checking in on one another, This can't just be about professionals and professional appointments or even counseling appointments. It's about everybody being concerned for one another. We are in a resilient community. One of the things they did mention that I thought was helpful, there's a website called mhanational.org for Mental Health Association National.org. And they've got a number of excellent tools there. One of the tools that's there is a mental health screening. And it's actually a free mental health test. That's at mhanational.org. And there were a number of other things that they were looking at, youth mental health, children's mental health. Well, let's face it, depression is up, anxiety is up, suicide is up, and we just have to keep working at what we can do, all of us as a community, to provide mental health encouragement for one another. They talked about children's partnership, and even something called the Standing Rock, an engagement of young people that's really working to fight against suicide. And let's see. And then finally, they had some suggestions, some of which cost money that it's just not out there. But they said, try to reduce the cost of services for people, increase the number of counselors, train an entire district and all staff with common language for dealing with mental health issues. That one stood out to me. And to make sure that we're having conversations with staff. And that again is admin, certified, classified, students, parents, everybody. And some of those conversations need to happen, they said, together. We've heard about our teachers being stressed, but the fact is that everybody is. Our society is under severe stress right now, and a severe mental health crisis, frankly. And so the more we can do to care about one another, the better. That was the mental health one.
May I ask a question, Bill? In the presenters, was there a school district that was in with the presentation? Sometimes it's a company, sometimes it's CSBA itself. So were there district presenters?
There was, but I was not. But I don't have that in my notes. But I know that it's definitely in the notes we have online.
So did these districts, in terms of using paying for those extra things that you talked about, was there a district who spoke that said we used ESSER money, or we used this pot of money and we took advantage of blah, 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 blah? Do you know what I mean?
No, that they didn't cover at all. Not in this particular session.
Cindy, in a session that I went to on mental wellness, it was Long Beach Unified School District, and they used LCAP funding for it. Their entire mental health department, and this is a huge district, right? Long Beach Unified, and I think they have 26 different sites, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head, that they are funding or are filtering through this. They call it the Family Resource Center, and they have actually two different Family Resources Center, a north and a south, because again, they're such a large district, but all of their funding's through LCAP. So it's sustainable.
Awesome. I can't wait till you get to report out for specifics, because that's the thing about the workshops is sometimes they have broad umbrella, and when you're sitting there, you really want to go, how did you do it? How did you implement? You want the specifics of how something was done to try to help bridge that to if it's something that we could do as well. So I can't wait to hear the specifics under your report.
Will do.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
And
yes, in fact, the session that I had was actually counselors, mental health counselors who were concerned about people issues. And so they weren't looking at programs like in the same way that probably Natalie's session did. Another one that I attended, and Cindy and I did this one together, so she may have several things to add to it. And that is just we attended an equity session in which Laguna, the school district, is talking about what they've been doing. But they're actually working with a very specific entity in how they've been doing it. But I was really, as we're looking at what they're doing, I'm like, oh, hey, we're going down the right road with the plans that we have. They talked about creating safe places for people to communicate, creating policies and programs and practices, but taking your time to develop them. They talked about that the leadership needs to be in the process of learning. That's what our committee is going to be doing. Our subcommittee will be working at listening and learning and being maybe pressed. That's one of the things that they talked about also, that things, the whole conversation regarding equity and racial justice, social justice can be difficult to talk about sometimes. I appreciated another thing that they said, that in coming up with a strategic design, there's no cookie cutter approach. And I think that's really important to understand as we look at our district. We're not the same as, for example, San Bernardino Unified or Hesperia or whatever. We are our own district, and we need to work our own approach. And boy, I really appreciated them emphasizing that. And they emphasized one of the things that I know Cindy and I are both concerned about, is making sure that we get community involvement. They said that that's critical to get the extended student involvement as well. We will be doing things with the subcommittee, but it can't just be the subcommittee. It's got to be a number of other people, and they talked about that, making sure that you're getting diverse involvement from your community, from the student body, that you're working at including the quiet people, the people that maybe wouldn't be talking, and helping them to have a voice. The way they said, add voices as the silent voices, and make sure that you identify the silent voices. Don't be trying to make lots of decisions. Don't be trying to make lots of recommendations, but instead listen and work together. And so, like I said, they had a systematic approach, a program that they used, an actual consulting firm. Well, I think we've got a pretty good program, and I realize that now I'm talking about the committee, but Dr. White and her plan, I think, lines up with some of the suggestions and things that they are doing. They also said, don't rush. Allow people to opt in when the time is right. And we need to be asking ourselves, what are we teaching when it comes to ethnic studies, for example? And what aren't we teaching that might be creating some type of inequity gap for people? And Cindy, you want to add anything on that one?
Sure. Just to let you know, in our board documents for this meeting, I had Mark upload all of the presentations from the workshops I went to. So you will find in that folder the PowerPoint from there that we saw. I think that Bill really touched on everything there. They did the same thing. They didn't want to rush to make resolutions that became empty. They did have a people in the community from the schools who did protests, but really strongly from the LGBTQ+ community, because they feel very much marginalized. And so they began this work through not only the protests, the George Floyd protests, but the resulting disturbances that they had, protests from LGBTQ+ community. And they did the same thing. They said it's going to be uncomfortable conversations, which Dr. White has told us. But as long as we create these safe spaces where people can speak and really be honest, and Bill's correct, you look for the quietest people. So we really need to do our due diligence in kind of asking our quiet parents, our quiet students, and really do some pulling in of some of our EL parents, our Hispanic parents, to bring in some of our LGBTQ plus students to come in, to those that really are hiding in the high school, so to speak, just marking their time through the 4 years. And so Bill's correct. I think he did a good job. I walked away from this feeling pretty darn good about the way we're approaching equity and social justice, and our plan for building sustainability, so that we're not done in 5 months, but that we're continuing the work that will go on. And so anyways, the PowerPoint presentation is in the board docs.
Good, thanks, Cindy. And is that something, Natalie, because I think we all probably downloaded, and there's lots of resources for all of these different workshops. So we probably want to put them into the board folder.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to totally switch gears on you, and I'm sure that others have maybe we're at this session, and that is current legal issues. And wow. There's too much detail to go into on that. They talked about AB 138 and the whole change in that's going with that, with the changing of strategic date for layoffs and all that. One of the things that I'm going to point out, though, that they did emphasize that you want to change your seniority to date of hire, and not based on the hours, but base it date on hire. That was something that I thought was really important, because you have people that are working different positions, and how are you going to determine where they are in seniority? And they said, do that based on date of hire. So Jenny, that's something for you. Oh, wow. There's just, Jordan, hopefully you attended this, or someone else, because there was so much detail, in current legal issues. They talked about something for us, the importance of a strong, united team. They actually had 5 subject areas that they really focused on. The first one was AB 138. The second one was having a strong, united team. And that they recommended, again, that board members, that we dust off our 9,000 bylaws, make sure that we're all studying through them again, and making sure that we've got those up to date as well. And are we living our philosophy? Are we living our beliefs? The things that we say that are our guiding principles, are we living them out? They encourage our new president to really learn about the delegating, how to run a board meeting, and we're supposed to let you know we're behind you, Madam President. Then they went on, and after talking about being a strong board, there was a good bit of conversation about the anticipated vaccines requirements, and as everyone knows, the governor has put out statements about vaccine requirements. If they're going to happen, they're not going to happen till the end of after this school year, and they really don't know. There continue to be judicial rulings, but that are and court cases even that are already occurring based on religious belief, and grants and regulations of law and legislation that's still happening. The state Senate and Assembly, the legislature, in other words, could enact some COVID vaccine requirements themselves, but none of those are happening at this time. They mentioned that 10% of the boards have actually enacted their own vaccine mandate, that there is at this moment, there's no exemption to not being tested, and there's no due process right now. They went on then to talk about the whole let them breathe, all about masks. And they did make this statement. They said the CDPH guidelines are guidelines, not mandates. I was a little uncomfortable with these next comments. They said that it's up to the boards to make recommendations. And let's see, but CDPH guidance still has a mask mandate. And the court cannot determine the end of a state of emergency. Some people have wanted courts to do that, but that is actually in the hands of the governor. The government powers have to be interpreted broadly in a state of an emergency, and elected officials, not unelected judges, need to be the ones making those decisions. So they went on and just had, there was a good bit of discussion, as you can imagine, about the mask mandate and the discomfort that people have about it. And they continue to remind us to check with our local public health. What is the county saying regarding the mask mandate? They have the power of law enforcement.
And just for clarification, in case anyone's wondering, San Bernardino County's Department of Public Health has adopted CDPH guidance as mandates. So even if you were to not look at it from a state level and look at it at a local level, it's being mandated.
And they reminded us, if you don't follow the mandate, you will not have your liability insurance, which is a very serious issue for any district to not have liability insurance. To put the district in jeopardy like that, because any lawsuit for somebody getting COVID, anything, we would be in major jeopardy. And so that was big red flags all from everyone that was present and making their presentation. Which led me to pure politics. That does sound like an oxymoron, I'm sorry to say. One of the things that in just talking about the politics of the times, and some, you can probably see this, that the governor got a 68% positive support in the recall election. And that has obviously affected what's going to happen with budgets, with all kinds of things, because of the confidence that the governor has now that he has a support, he has mandate behind him. But in the pure politics session, the thing that stood out to me, and there I could go into a number of items, but the thing that I thought was really important for us, and Cindy, I think you'll appreciate this, is our responsibility, each one of us, to connect with our legislators. We've got good respect from Rosalisi and Smitty. They both attend sessions with our board members and across the area. But they said, make sure that you're making contact with them, that you're giving them our contact, individual contact information, and say, we're available if they have questions about schools. And they said, when you call, this was an interesting comment. They said, when you call them by their first name. Don't say, can I speak to the Honorable, Smitty Smith? But actually say, I'd like to speak to Smitty, please. I'd like to speak to Rosalisi, because you're at a respected level. They appreciate school boards and the representation. And in fact, the funny thing is I was at a meeting where Smitty was at right after this, about a week later, and he came over to me. And I'm like, you're the assemblyman. And he came over to me and said, Bill, thank you for your work and for serving on a school board. And it was really an encouragement. I'm like, okay, so just a reminder, there's lots of challenges ahead. That's one of the things they said. There's a lot of money coming right now this year, and they explained why, because of personal income and the top 20% and stuff like that. But they were again reminding us, too much of this money, half of it is probably going to be one-time funds, and we still, doesn't matter how much money they give us right now, we are facing a severe problem coming in 2023. as we've all heard, it's all been referred to as the cliff that's coming in 2023, the declining enrollment. There is the bill that's been at least semi being discussed right now about the possibility of changing things from attendance to actual enrollment and basing funds on that, but no telling what's going to happen to that. But it's something that we need to keep speaking up for. And there's lots more. I think it's time for me to let someone else talk. Madam President.
All very helpful information. We do have 2 speakers waiting for public testimony. So I'm going to put a pause on our discussion that we're having and transition back to 8.0, which is public testimony. So 8.0 public testimony, 8.1 public comment period for items listed on this agenda and non-agenda items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the governing board. The public comment period is administered by state law and is the point in the meeting set aside for members of the public to share their opinions with the board. Open meeting laws do not permit the board to engage in dialogue or answer questions. Though it may not take action on non-agenda issues raised at the public comment period, the board, for example, may refer any matter to the superintendent for review or take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Protocols for speakers. Any person wishing to address the governing board on agenda and non-agenda items within the subject matter of their jurisdiction must complete a speaker's form and submit it to the executive secretary to the superintendent before a meeting is called to order. I'm just going to pause there because this was a workshop. We came back from closed session prior to allowing to 5:30, which is when we asked speakers to be available, and our modified procedures during COVID allow us to do that. So individual speakers are allowed 3 minutes to address the board on each agenda item. The board limits the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes. Speakers who have complaints against board members or staff are encouraged to seek resolution to these complaints by using the Room of the World Unified School District written complaint procedure rather than orally addressing them at a meeting. The board will not respond to such complaints until the applicable complaint procedure BP-AR 1312.1 has been followed and has reached the board level. Where a complaint concerns a district employee identifiable by name, position, or other facts, the board cannot respond until proper written notice has been given to the employee pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. Decorum. The governing board is interested in the ideas and opinions of all stakeholders and endeavors to incorporate community views into its deliberations and decisions. At the same time, it must be able to conduct its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, in accordance with Board Bylaw 9323 and Governing Code Section 54957.9, audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede orderly conduct of this meeting. Open meeting laws do not confer any privilege or protection for expression beyond that otherwise provided by law. The public's understanding and cooperation are appreciated. 8.2, public comments. So we will begin with Bradley Jolbransky, I hope I pronounced that correctly, parent of student. We're going to give it a moment for technology to catch up and see if he could get on with us. Bradley, if you could hear us, we see that you're logged in and you submitted your form as required. So if you're able to, it looks like you're muted. If you can unmute, now's your chance. Mark, does everything look good on our end with technology? It does? Okay. Is our second speaker Mr. Whitty? George, are you available? And we'll go ahead and let you go next.
Am I on?
Yes, you are. Thank you, George.
Okay. As ever, my priority in speaking at these meetings is to work toward keeping in-person school open to the maximum extent possible. But I'm concerned that our district is mishandling our response to COVID and not taking the issue seriously enough, as illustrated by these examples. One, we got a notice yesterday that students who've been vaccinated can just come right back to school even if they're aware of a firsthand exposure to someone with COVID. This is not only bad scientific practice, but violates the CDC guidelines for probably a majority of the vaccinated students in the school, because the effectiveness of a Pfizer vaccine that the students got diminishes over time and due to mutations of the virus, to the point that 5 months later, the CDC considers those vaccinated with Pfizer to actually be the equivalent of unvaccinated for the purposes of quarantine. The Pfizer vaccine has been shown to be only about 30% effective in preventing Omicron infections after 2 shots, though more effective at preventing hospitalizations. So no, those kids who got vaccinated with Pfizer before about August 1st should not come back to school after a known exposure to someone with COVID unless they got the booster, which almost none have, as it was only approved this week. This was pointed out to the board and superintendent within an hour of that errant notice going out, but no correction has been issued. Students are worried enough about getting an excused absence that they're going back to school the next day, acting as possible vectors for COVID. Our son Chris was vaccinated in May. We are keeping him home after an exposure to a student with COVID, and we have no idea how this is going to be handled. 2, we also got a message that our son had been exposed to the virus at school and that he should not come back to school, in direct conflict with the message we got from Michelle Murphy the day before. But then the attachment said that if he was vaccinated, he should come to school, even though, as stated above, this is out of compliance with CDC guidelines. To say the least, this conflicting messaging on such an important topic damages our confidence in our district's administration. 3, I have to point out the obvious irony that the board moved to a Zoom meeting on the basis that an in-person meeting today was too risky. The meeting would have been about 20 people in a large room, the school library, for an hour and a half. Yet it's somehow so much safer to have 35 people in a room 1/4 that size for 35 hours a week that we can be careless with things like the isolation protocol. This makes no sense, and I detect no sense of urgency on the part of the board or the administration to optimize our safety protocols in the face of a far more contagious variant. We're facing a real surge in cases here, and it's time to let sound science and medical practices dictate policy. And once again, the actual qualified researchers at Johns Hopkins Medical Center, Harvard Medical School, Stanford Medical School, and hundreds of other actual research institutions mandate for their own people in their own facilities 100% vaccinated, 100% masked. These people are actually qualified to do their own research and have done so. And this is not just what they say to the media, it's what they do to themselves and their families. I can't
George.
fathom why we wouldn't follow their example and urge the board to exercise maximum caution in making decisions regarding our COVID protocol. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. I was waiting for you to finish a sentence, but we are at 3 minutes. Thank you, George.
Thanks.
Mark, did our other speaker log in again, or do we know if?
It just shows that his mic is muted.
Okay. Bradley, if you're able to unmute your mic, we're just going to give it another moment so you have an opportunity to speak if possible. All right, well, our apologies for whatever the technical difficulties are. I hope they get worked out and you're able to join us next time. We are going to then switch back to what we were doing in 9.1, which was setting direction. We were having a discussion about our conference that we attended, the California School Board Association. And I think Bill was wrapping up. So I wanted to invite Jordan to share some of his highlights from the conference and things that he thinks we would like to hear about.
Sure, thank you. I would just like to provide clarity on the press release that was put out by the district. It wasn't due to potential risk. It was due to a confirmed case amongst cabinet and board members. So it was not, it wasn't a concern out of risk. It was because of a confirmed case that this decision was made. I will talk about the annual education conference. It was in person this year, and I was very excited to go to all of the sessions that they had to offer. They had more sessions available this year than they did last year, I feel like. There was so many that I wanted to attend. There was one that Bill had mentioned about legal issues coming up in 2022. I was not able to attend that one. I think I was at managing Oped liabilities. But there was so many that I wanted to watch. I did hear that CSBA recorded all of the sessions. I'm wondering if we might be able to get access to those. I'm thinking out loud. But I attended conferences on almost every topic that I could find. We as a board do our very best each year to try to spread ourselves out over all of the sessions that are being offered. At any given time during a time slot during this 3-day conference, they offer upwards of 15 plus sessions at the same time. So you really have to read through each of them. And then, as Cindy has mentioned earlier, see who is presenting. Is it a law firm? Is it a district? Is it somebody from an advocacy organization like Capital Advisors Group or something like that? So you have to read through all of those. Sometimes they'll upload documentation ahead of time so you can kind of get a sneak peek. But I went to everything from, equity to raising funds for districts, this, particularly parcel tax they were talking about, advocacy at the state and federal levels, to managing Oped liabilities, to let's see what else, to federal actions and legislation currently in the works. So I am happy to talk about all of those with anyone that's interested. My favorite one, of course, was managing Oped liabilities within changing budgets. I think that was my favorite one. A lot of really interesting ideas. What it comes down to is potential ways to be smart with districts' monies and going through all of the options to manage Oped liabilities. It's something, and Oped, for anyone wondering, is other post-employment benefit liabilities. So those are very real for every district, and very, very few districts have plans in place that help ensure that those Oped liabilities will be met in the future. So very good. I took probably 2 or 3 pages worth of notes on that one. Equity was great. Advocacy was a really good one. I just want to mention that one too, because Bill mentioned it. Advocacy, it was a whole session on advocacy at the federal and state levels, and how important it is for districts to be reaching out, talking and being on a first name basis with our elected representatives. I know Paul and I know Rosalicier. I haven't had a chance to talk to Smitty yet, but maybe we'll be on a first name basis at some point. But it was very important in talking about how districts really need to step up to demonstrate to our elected lawmakers the real needs of our district, the inequities in funding, in our state, the way our state funds things, the inequity in, how we don't get all federal funding that we're supposed to get. So these are a lot of things that they talk through with a lot of steps. They brought in to this one. They brought in somebody from a school district that does advocacy work, and they brought in several other consultants that do that type of work as well from the state and federal level. And that was just really hit home that there's a lot that could be done. State legislature is coming back into session now, and there's a lot of talk about what the future is going to be. The governor's budget proposals coming out next week. So very soon we'll be seeing his educational priorities, and then we'll see what the legislature's educational priorities will be soon after that. And we'll have an opportunity from now until the May revise to really start hitting the pavement to increase funding for our districts. One that Bill had mentioned earlier, and Cindy and Michelle has also brought it to our attention, is SB 830. It talks about funding the way districts are, changing the way districts are funded from a average daily attendance to an average daily, enrollment? Membership. Average daily membership is the new phrase that we'll have to monitor and see about, if that's going to create more equitable funding for our districts. It certainly would cost a lot more at the state level. I think they put a price tag on this at $3 billion. So it's a big piece of potential, but also funding for our districts. And we, as our little Rim of the World Unified School District, has a chance to be part of that conversation, especially considering that we have elected representatives that have been in our shoes before. Rosalicia Ochoa-Bo, our state senator, has been in our position before in Yucaipa-Calimesa Unified School District. So she knows and understands the reality that that is, insufficient budgets for school districts. So that was a really, I think, great one that we could walk home with a lot of action items on. All the other ones I attended were really good from a educational perspective. And then, of course, the last thing that I enjoy most about the annual education conference is being able to converse with other elected board members from all over the state. There's over 1,000 school districts, and gosh, hundreds showed up at the annual education conference, and being able to talk to them about what they're facing in their districts and commiserate on issues, but also collaborate on ideas for improvements and take some ideas back to our districts. There's a lot of small rural districts that I think are in worse positions than we are. And there's some that are, but there's also nuggets of advice that you can take back with them. Lots of really exciting conversations there. I think it's a very energetic conference, and I feel like most board members walk away feeling energized about the new year and what can be done and what can we look into, and slowly over time, make those changes where and when possible. A lot of districts I was talking to, as an example, were talking about care solace and wanting to investigate bringing that into their district, looking at the costs which have gone up, to bring in care solace, and what can be used to, can we use ESSER funds for that? Can we, how can we as a district fund it? And it just felt good that we've had care solace since pre-pandemic. So it goes to show that, in some areas we're doing well, and in some areas there's a lot of great ideas to take back to the table. Advocacy is the one that I think we could really help Cindy out with a bit more. But I know that we all have an interest in it, and I know that we all have done advocacy work in the past, and we just, I think, ought to do a good bit more. So there's a good opportunity for that, having just gone to the AAC and gone to all these sessions.
Jordan, did you take Advocacy 101?
I believe that was the name of it. Yes.
Yeah, that's the one that got me started. And the lady, Dennis Meyer and Terry Vigil from Fall River did mine, and got me on the path. And like, I left Advocacy 101 and immediately did an application for Delegate Assembly and San Bernardino County School Board's executive. And so Terry unfortunately passed away right before Thanksgiving, and that hit hard for me because she was an inspiration to me. But it is a really amazing class, and I agree with you. I think that you and I've talked about this of meeting as a board with our superintendent at least once a year with each of our elected officials to just have a chitty chat. It doesn't need to be a complaining session. It can be just, hey, let's educate you about these amazing things we have, and here are our list of challenges. And then if we have specific positions on bills, we can bring them up with them. So maybe the next time that they are in district, we can set up a meeting with Smitty and Senator Ochoa Bogue and actually get it started to develop those relationships. Because I agree with you, it's super fun to have a one-on-one.
And, I think that we're in a unique position that I know that Rosalicia will listen, and I have talked with her before on school district issues, and, since she's been elected. And she's also reached out and asked for information. Sydney Sonk reached out and asked for some more info about, I can't remember what it was now, but I sent a very long email back and said, oh, you asked for an opinion, here you go. And here's some considerations, and here's what other districts have been doing. Here's what some other lawmakers are considering. So again, I think it's really great that we could advocate for, whatever it is, more funding for districts, but coming to them with a potential solution for it, not just like Cindy said, a complaining session, but hey, maybe here's some ideas to consider when you're thinking on or maybe writing legislation to help address this issue we're talking about.
So Jordan, I know that you mentioned coming out of one session, parcel tax was discussed. So why don't you give us a little synopsis of why you were frustrated with that particular workshop coming out? Not frustrated, but like, So because I thought it was a good tidbit of info.
I was really excited for this one because we obviously went for a bond measure a couple years back, Measure A, and we didn't get it. Interestingly, most bond measures did not pass. 80% or so failed during that election. It was very unusual in the state. So I was really excited when I saw it was called How to Pass a Parcel Tax for Employee Compensation. So not only was it a little bit different, not a bond measure, but a permanent parcel tax. So you need that 2/3 majority there, a super majority to pass it. But it was also for a specific cause, raising employee compensation. And the district that pursued it was some of it was a very well executed strategy, and some of it was a bit of luck, they said. Part of that luck was their election day was March 2020, but the first week of March 2020. So it was about a week and a half or so before the world stopped, before all schools closed and whatnot, or rather schools moved virtual. So part of it was timing, and part of it was very well executed strategy. And the well executed strategy part was the part I was particularly interested in, because I wanted, to take some notes back. And Cindy said it was a little frustrating, but I think overall reaffirming all of their strategies that they undertook were things that we did in Measure A, community meetings, putting out as much information as possible, giving interviews, talking to the opposition, and having real meaningful conversations about what their issues are, what their concerns are, and how we might be able to best address it. Talking to supporters and getting some feet on the ground and really doing the advocacy work, and more importantly, the educational work to educate folks what are the district's needs, sticking to the facts. That was a big part of their things. Don't go down a pathway that just leads to pure arguments or emotion. Stick to the facts, illustrate the needs in your districts, explain what those needs, what having the parcel tax, or in our case, a bond, what it would do for the district, and then illustrate a very clear picture, or paint a very clear picture of what happens if you don't pass the tax or if you don't pass the bond, so that folks can really see and evaluate with the parcel tax or bond measure, without the parcel tax and bond measure. And you can see they're very, very different. I remember we created a lot of great literature on that. I remember Jenny volunteered for the campaign, and put together some really great infographics for our district to showcase the sheer level of needs in our district and what will happen without it. So again, that was the frustration. It was, nothing against their district. It was just everything they did, I feel like we did. But perhaps we need to do better, do the same, but more.
Yeah, Jordan, I would share your frustration having to listen to that and go like, but what different do we need to do? Because ours failed and we did all of these things. And, maybe that's just the part where luck, wasn't on our side. But also reassuring to know we had a lot of great people on our team putting together really solid ideas, things that we have been taught about, that we researched, that other districts have been successful in doing. And we fought hard to get it by doing all of those things. And it remains, again, frustrating that it didn't turn out in our favor. And we are seeing the consequences of not getting those passed, of not getting those funds. And our students are seeing the consequences of that, and their staff and everybody who walks through the district will see those consequences. And it's really hard to just say like, well, we tried to help and you didn't let us in this way. But that's how it feels. So
Yeah.
it's frustrating. For sure.
Even down to their endorsement section that they talked about, getting very influential, having the union on board. For them, they said it was very easy to get the union on board because they were passing a parcel tax for employee compensation. And kudos to them, what they passed was permanent. It was not, there was no sunset on that parcel tax. So, big kudos to them on that. But, getting the unions on board and endorsing it, getting community leaders on board and endorsing it, getting teachers on board and endorsing it, getting business leaders on board and endorsing it. We did all of that through our website and through the newspapers.
And now as we look at this moving forward, I'm curious from the rest of the board, and Jordan, you might have some from the presentation, of how their community may have been different from ours in regards to the likelihood of passing a parcel tax, and what, maybe this are smaller rural, more people are vacationers, or we have owners that are, not there full time. And if that makes it a greater challenge to pass those.
I think partially, yes. But, it's hard to say because they have a very long history of passing bond measures and parcel taxes in their district. But the problem is almost every school district in the state does. Even RIM has a successful parcel and bond tax history if you look back at our elections, except for Measure A. So Measure A was the outlier. Generally speaking, you're in a very good position if you have a bond measure on the ballot for education. And maybe it was the unlucky part of that.
I think, Jordan, that, and Nellie, I think we weren't lucky. I think that unfortunately that coming with increases in taxes over since Measure W, there has been an increase in taxes over and over and over again. Gas, fuel tax, those kinds of things. It's like, it's been like Chinese water torture almost. And I think that sometimes this may not be a referendum on us versus drawing the line in the sand of like, we can't take it anymore,
More of a representation of where our community or where our state is as a whole. Because again, the vast majority of these did not pass during that election. So I wanted us to own any responsibility where we have it so we can make improvements, and moving forward, we don't make those same mistakes again. That being said, it is important for us to understand how much of the responsibility is on us and how much of it was attributed to just where people are in relation to the government, in relation to being taxed, in relation to their finances. All of those things kind of pointed to the fact that more taxes is not something that anybody wanted during that election.
I'd also add that might be a difference with our community is that one, I heard a lot of feedback from Crestline about the properties that weren't being used. So there was some resistance as far as the bond initiative when now with us looking at real estate and actually acting on it, that might be the difference. But I know that there was resistance there. And also I heard resistance from our older population, ones who don't have kids in the district. So for senior citizens who are on a fixed income, the idea of voting in favor of having more, higher financial obligation, that was something that I was hearing about, that there was resistance to as well.
Now, another difference, because what I was really going in for is I wanted to go into the session and pick apart everything about our Measure A campaign. I wanted to see, what did we do wrong? What could we have done better? I was hoping that I'd walk into the session and walk out of it thinking, wow, they ripped apart everything we did on Measure A. But no, it's very reaffirming. One of the differences that they did was a flat tax per parcel. So it wasn't based on home value. So that was one interesting difference. Another one was it's a parcel tax. So it's not the district taking on debt, it's the district, being supported through taxpayer dollars. So again, they went for a parcel tax, we went for a bond measure because we thought it'd be easier, and generally that's the case. So those were two of the big differences, I think.
Thank you, Jordan. Did anybody have any other questions for Jordan about any of the workshops he attended? All right. Dana, would you like to present on yours? You are on mute, just so you know.
Okay, I'm off of mute now. Okay, so quick rundown of the sessions that there are a lot of sessions that I thought were very worthwhile. So quick rundown of the titles that I found to be sessions that I found to be the best was for starters, I went to a partnership approach to mentally healthy schools that was put on by the partnership was taking place in Denair Unified School Districts. I'll talk about that in a moment. How to improve student achievement without additional funding. The student voice and decision-making and board governance that I'm sure Cindy will probably want to talk about as well, not to mention the one we also attended on critical issues facing small school districts. So backing up to a partnership approach to mentally healthy schools. This was, Denair is a rural school district, and they did have a partnership with Legacy Health Endowment. So they did receive funding through grant money. Also, they're in Northern California and had involvement with Stanford University professionals. And the approach they took, or the focus was on staff. Thinking was that they needed to first focus on staff mental health. I want to kind of like the concept of if you're in an airplane, you first make sure you have oxygen before you attend to the people around you. So over, the last summer, they put together this program that it's been heavily written about, building a mentally healthy system. This is their white paper on it, and this is another report that quoting the superintendent, I was weary and knew I needed something. So the person who made the presentation was Jeffrey Lewis. He is the partner. He is the president of the Legacy Endowment. Basically the grant, the people who were providing the money and the services. So what was really interesting though was how much effort and they put into the staff. Again, they weren't using, it wasn't in their LCAP, it wasn't LCFF funding, it was outside funding. They brought in a couple of different professionals, Dr. Nia Chaudhary, it was a Stanford psychiatrist. They met with staff. Staff was really resistant. Their feeling was, we don't want your help. And that was initially, and so they had to overcome a lot of resistance to be able to get to the point of being productive. What they said at the presentation was starting now, and actually it's winter, actually more so in the spring, their focus was going to turn to the kids and the students. They had already started conversations with students, having those same professionals working on developing relationships with the students. But along with having the psychiatrist, they also had Lauren Hodges, who was a performance coach, who also worked with staff in wellness techniques and more individualized coaching to be able to make sure that they were taking care of themselves first. So I thought that was really interesting. The documents that were attached to that presentation, I've asked Mark to go ahead and put the ones that I was holding up, into the folder. But I think that right now, like Bill mentioned, and I'm sure Natalie will be discussing as far as the mental health session that she went to, we're hurting as a district. The adults are struggling, as are the kids, as our whole community. It isn't just an education phenomena. And I found it really interesting how they really put a focused effort on staff and put together a cohesive program, not pushing the kids aside, but basically saying we need to be able to make sure our infrastructure is healthy and well to be able to take on what we've already seen this school year. Next session I want to talk about is how to improve student achievement without additional funding. This was put on by various instructors that I've had for the Masters in Governance classes I attended. And that was fantastic. And again, the documents from there, they ran out of them. The session was so well attended, they didn't have the supporting documents, but they talked about some very actionable strategies that we could initiate to be able to help with our district student achievement. So the 6 factors, this is all very data driven too. So based on the Lighthouse study and then additional studies that they've done since, and all that data is now available to us, they found 6 factors supporting district improvement. 1, setting visions and goals. So being very clear in those visions and in our vision and setting measurable goals, and aligning our resources to match priorities. So that's 1. 2, having systems coherence. 3, data used for continuous improvement. 4, having a culture of support. 5, investing in staff capacity at all levels. And 6, planning for leadership turnover. So they said in regards to board meetings, they were really recommending we take a look at our agenda, making sure that we have 60% of the agenda focused on student learning. They also recommended possibly relooking at how we have our agenda organized and having it organized by our strategic goals. They suggested looking at Carmel Unified School District's agendas. They have done that in the past year, and they found it to be really helpful to make sure that they are having a continued focus on district priorities. They also made a big appeal to investing in community engagement, and that's essential to the district and student success. They said schools with high levels of trust within the community are 3 times more likely to yield positive outcomes. And that's especially important to have transparency in community relations. So the number of the things they were talking about, I felt proud of that. We are definitely, I think, doing a lot of wonderful things. However, I think that there are areas of improvement. And so one of the handouts that I had them emailed to me because again, they were out of them, was 20 strategies school boards can utilize to improve student achievement without additional funding. And then being very specific about those 6 different pillars on how to be able to really implement it within the district. And then in addition, they have a governance brief. They emailed it to me, so that document hopefully will be in your folders. And this brief is on the school board's role in creating the conditions for student achievement, and it's a review of the research. So this is the brief, which I think is like 5 pages with a huge bibliography. In addition, I have a link to their website that has all of the research from which this was pulled. So they said for you data monkeys out there, there's a lot to back it up. But I felt this was a really, really worthwhile session to attend, and there were some real rock stars that were presenting at it. So let me see here. Another session that I just was blown away by was student voice and decision making and board governance. I know Cindy was really excited about that as well and has had some meetings with other folks. So I'll chime in, I imagine, when you talk about it. And then the critical issues facing small school districts. That was a real intense, to me, kind of a session. There was one takeaway that I have written somewhere in my notes that kind of stored it away. There was a lot of frustration with small school districts and not having all of the different departments and the support and all the things that we're continually agonizing over. But one of the attendees made a comment that when they were having some problems with connectivity within their district, is they appealed to their cell providers to see if, because they had found that when fires have swept through areas, they put in temporary cell towers to be able to help with connectivity. So that was one of the things that I was wondering about. Now would not be the time, but with connectivity issues, especially if we look at having to go virtual or to help with our students that are in hard areas to reach, is seeing if Verizon might have some temporary towers that they can put in, along with all the hotspot efforts and the different things that we're doing to try and create that connectivity.
Brianna, I think that they also said, the county supervisor, because money's there and the temporary towers magically become permanent.
Yes.
And so that was one thing, is that you start with the temporaries, that which then turn into the permanent.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and those are the, just kind of a brief overview of what I got out of it. Frankly, those 4 sessions in particular, I thought were fantastic.
And Jordana, I already had Mark upload the presentation for the critical issues facing small districts. And I think too that some of the districts really emphasized looking at your community and looking at the resources and networking. And so part of it was like creating those community partnerships. One district within the conversation talked about how there's a reservation, and they had a relationship that they developed with the reservation, and the reservation is really supporting that district in programs, financially, just in so many a myriad of ways. And Jordan is like, oh, some of this stuff we just can't grasp, and so that's like Jordan expressing frustration of the parcel tax stuff. It's like you go, we're trying so hard to maximize our community partnerships.
There's another school district I know of, Prather Unified, that also has the same relationship locally with a Indian tribe, and they are at the foothill of the Sierra Nevadas. They have a similar demographic and geography of ours, but they have that relationship. So frustrating.
And I remember saying to somebody that we tried to, PTA tried to reach out to Home Depot to, because we were like, oh, Home Depot supports schools and they have this and that. And then when you speak to the one down the hill, they're like, oh yeah, you're not in our community, because we're up and we're isolated. And so we don't, there's businesses and organizations that don't feel partnered to us because we're out there. Yeah. It was super, like you, Jordan, I kind of felt frustrated, like, oh, missed opportunity.
Yeah. But I also appreciated having a whole bunch of small school districts represented in this room. And like the undercurrent, you had mentioned it also in meetings that you had gone to earlier, Cindy, that there is a need for these our smaller, more rural districts to combine and force, and that a lot of the policies that are out there are really geared towards districts that have the department for this and a department for that. And there was definitely that frustration was coming through about how our staff has to wear so many different hats that and we don't have the representation because we don't have people who can go to Sacramento and just be there speaking for our district all the time. It's just a different dynamic compared to an LA Unified or even a San Bernardino Unified.
And
I think one of the things though that the takeaway from this is like when in regards to the community involvement is that we do have great relationships with the businesses up here. They do help us to the best of their ability. We appreciate those connections and those relationships. However, large businesses don't exist on this mountain. A Home Depot doesn't exist on this mountain. We don't have a casino on this mountain. Like there are just so many, again, limitations to, they're usually privately owned, mom and pop. Even if our biggest of companies are family owned businesses and their resources are limited too. And we know that. So our asks are reasonable accordingly, but it just doesn't fill that gap the way other districts are able to fill it. And I think the community expects us to get all this funding from donations that doesn't occur. And it's not a lack of trying, it's not a lack of ability to establish relationships and maintain them and offer what we can, in those relationships. It's just that they don't exist.
And I think that Michelle's done a good job in cobbling together small businesses that have helped us in various different ways. And RIMED Foundation has really, in the last decade, I would say, really have become very focused. Their efforts are really focused and well managed, well planned, step by step throughout the year, and they follow that plan. And as a result, we have great support for both the school sites as well as AVID and ROP. And I think we, in having those relationships, we really are trying to cobble stuff together. But Nallie's right, and Jordana, you're right. I mean, when you don't have some of the, like the high desert has access to car dealership that does this economic program for students, and it seems to stop right at the base of the mountain. And so you think about all the opportunities. UC Riverside has opportunities that they push out into San Bernardino, like giving free bus passes for kids that want to take classes there in the summer, and yet we don't have that. It stops at the base of the mountain because we don't have a bus transportation that goes to UCR. So it sometimes I feel like it does stop, but I feel appreciative over the relationships that all of us, Jordana and Bill, you guys go to Crestline Connects. Look at how much they've supported us. Yes, it's a small program, but it's important, Scott's Lodge. I mean, so through everybody's efforts, we are taking the max effort of creating those relationships that can help this program or help this or help this.
We may have the opportunity for some of the larger corporations that we don't realize that we do have connections to. I think of an example of Subaru, who markets up to here, right? Right at the base of the mountain. Subaru is San Bernardino saying, hey, come on, Crestline, or Lake Arrowhead, right? Or here's another one, Stater Brothers. Is again a larger corporation. So we probably have some ability to do that maybe we haven't farmed the same way yet. And I would say let's keep working at that. Even Ahava, and I'm saying that wrong, I know. It's formerly San Manuel. Again, they have concerns for up here on the mountain too. Properties right on the edge of our mountain. So I think there's some ways that we might be able to work at that more.
That's true. You look at the amount of Subarus on the mountain, they dominate. We're like the advertisement for why you need a Subaru. Just take a look at our mountain roads right now.
Or Jeeps. or
Right.
Jeeps too as
The
well.
same-
So there's
the-
some opportunities we have that we might want to try to continue to work at more.
Yeah. And the same thing, Home Depot. Yeah, you're far away, but you're the one that we shop at. All of us shop at that Home Depot. And so, it might be a matter of getting to the right person at the right time, at the right moment, in the right way to kind of be establishing that relationship. But I know, as Cindy knows, through PTA, we have reached out to certain businesses who you just mentioned, and we do not get a positive or any response from them.
It's interesting. I mean, they sell snow shovel, they sell snow gear, they sell, snow blowers. Who do they think's buying them all?
Well, you also have Ace Hardware, which is again local entity, or CarQuest. I mean, there are entities that have broader and more statewide or national connections. So
I do have to say, I do want to say one thing. In working with Home Depot with the Rim High School hallway painting, Ray, shout out to Ray, head of the supervisor for the paint department, basically, in telling him what the project was the scope of the project. He was awesome. He segged us and hooked us onto another contractor under another contractor number so that we could get contractor prices for all of our materials and paint. So, I mean, yes, we saved money and Jenny knows this. For $12,000, the entire inside of the school, all the hallways and the weight room and the doors were painted. And, that shout out to Ray for giving us those discounts to spread.
And I think, it's maybe little efforts repeatedly over and over and over again, because again, I'm not bagging on Home Depot at all. They have given me free plants for every teacher, during Teacher Appreciation Week. But I think the scope that people expect us to get things on is like a new football field from Home Depot. Like, it's just, that isn't going to happen, or we haven't found a way to make it happen yet. So I think there's little ways where we are getting our feet on the ground and getting donations that are much on a much smaller scale. They do help out and they pay off in the long run. But when we're looking at such massively large projects that we'd like to complete, I don't think a financial fairy is just going to come over our school district and dust us with money. Like, it's not going to happen.
No HVAC system is going to whoosh appear out of nowhere.
No matter how much we need it and how much we all want it. Like,
I have reached out to Supervisor Rutherford's office about that issue. So perhaps, you never know, but I doubt $20 million will fall from the sky from the county. But
Janet might be our hero.
maybe she could help a little.
Yes. Okay, anything else on Jana's presentations? No. Cindy, would you like to go next, or would you like me to? Go for it.
Okay. So I have jumped in when Bill and Jordana, we attended the same thing. Sometimes I didn't even know Jordana was in the room for the small schools one, and until I heard her voice ask a question, I'm like, that's Jordana. So the first one on Thursday that I went to, which was an overflow of event, and Natalie and I were super lucky to get in the room, called Critical Race Theory, Ethnic Studies in Assembly Bill 101. And then I went to San Bernardino City Unified's How to Create a Systemic and Effective Family Engagement Program. And it ended up being really, really pertinent about a particular program that they do that feeds right into the A through G completion rate and requirements conversation. And I was like, oh, unintended positive consequence of going there. And then, of course, Jordana and I went to the student voice and decision making and board governance. Friday went to the one with Jordana, the small schools. And then one that I found super interesting, I sat next to Dr. Avila from Corona, meeting the needs, no, I'm sorry, Rialto. Is it Rialto? Yeah, meeting the needs of long-term English learners in California public schools. And then Saturday, Bill and I went to the Long Beach Unified's Equity Journey. So I know there was some overlap, but it was really good. And again, I put in all the documentation. The one on the language, the long-term language, I took pictures of their slideshow, their presentation. There is not on the AEC website. So that's why you go, huh, why is that fuzzy? Well, it's my pictures. I don't know what to tell you. So I'm going to start with critical race theory. Natalie and I went to that, and it should have been in the large general session room because people were turned away and there was a long line to get into that.
It should have been in a boxing ring.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then at the end, woo, mediation needed to be between some of those board members asking those questions. So again, this document is in the board docs. It was presented by our own attorney law firm. So that was kind of nice. So they talked about the diversity in California, how it breaks out: 39% Latino, 36% white, 15% Asian, 6% African American, fewer than 1% Native American or Alaska natives, and then 3% multiracial or other. So, and they presented a bunch of data. Jordana, you and I, girl, love that data. So there's a lot of graphs and data in this presentation, which I'm not going to go over. But the whole idea is the fact that look at your schools, look at your school, your teachers, your staff, your administrators, because studies suggest that students benefit from having a diverse staff, of having people that look like them and their own experiences working with them. And we've heard that over and over in our diversity discussions that you may have been involved in. They did go over what is critical race theory. Really big thing to take away. Critical race theory is an academic theory that emerged in the 1970s. This is really taught, they said, in law schools. This is law so that our future attorneys are looking at the laws on the book through the lens of equity, of systemic racist practices. They brought up the housing, redlining, those kinds of things. And so what it is it a theory? It's a theory. It isn't like a textbook curriculum that you're going to give a child and say, here's critical race theory. And so it's...
If I can just chime in and maybe echo or highlight again, that it currently is taught in law school to adults who have completed at least a bachelor's degree and are well on their way to becoming lawyers. And I think in our, and I know in our community, I have heard people say they're going to force critical race theory on my child, or they're going to be teaching this to my child. Because it is a theory, it's the same, it's taught at that grad school level, because that's the kind of cognitive capacity that's required of it, you know, and to be able to look at it in that sort of lens. There's no legal mandate, there's no curriculum written for K through 12 on critical race theory that is implemented or must be implemented at this time.
Yeah, and it's really about lawyers or potential lawyers looking at legal systems and policies of embedded systemic racist practices and laws, and how that racism shaped public policies. So it goes from laws to public policy, and it's really lawyers who have to go into court really understanding, looking at the laws and how racism has really from the very beginning been built into the legal system. And that outlawing discrimination when you're talking in this theory is not the same as ensuring equity. It's not the same. You can make a law that bans discrimination, but that doesn't eliminate that doesn't eliminate the problem, that doesn't ensure equity. It just doesn't. So the whole idea is that racism, because of the way it's been embedded in public policy and in law, it's a part of our everyday life, whether we're aware of it or not. We are subjected to the laws, public policy, and sometimes we're not even aware that it is, because we're not aware of a law. We're not aware of this. We're not aware of that. So that's why this theory in law school is taught, because it's their job to look at that and see how it has impacted someone in a case, or a business in a case, or whatever. And critical race theories focuses on outcomes and not individual personal beliefs. Again, legal system, public policy, housing discrimination, redlining, all those things that have resulted from public policy and law. And then
we saw within that presentation a variety of elected school board officials and or superintendents, that's really who is attending this conference, make it a personal issue and make it about personal beliefs. And it became very heated and very debated. And I think it's something that as time goes on in public education, if there's more talk about it, that personal beliefs are going to be construed, weaved into it, or it's going to be construed as personal beliefs versus a theory that is practiced in law school.
And in the presentation, and what they said is that the protests that you've been seeing about towards critical race theory at school boards or in media and stuff have been mostly centered on elementary and secondary schools by parents and political activists and groups that say that CRT is going to promote discrimination against the white group, that it's divisive. It's going to shame a white student in the classroom. It's going to promote hatred of America and its history, and that it portrays whites as oppressors and people of color as oppressed victims. And again, as Nally has pointed out, this is a theory for lawyers taught at that level, at a graduate school level, and that most educators actually support the idea of anti-discrimination, and they teach, and their teaching strategies make schools safe in teaching history and the historical events that have occurred both in the United States and in the world through world history. But there's, especially when the 1619 Project came up to being, that's really when the lighter was turned on to a very long fuse. And I think that has really brought a lot of debate. And it's a project that was started by the New York Times Magazine in August 2019 on the 40th anniversary of the beginning of the American history. And I'm not going to go into all of that. It's all in the PowerPoint presentation that you guys will see. So they talked a bit about really what critical race theory is and what it's not. Then segging, because this gets mixed up, is California now is going to require ethnic studies. And the California State Board of Education developed through years and years and years with all these various different groups, Jewish groups, Black groups, Latinx groups, sorry, said that incorrectly, all the LGBTQ plus, all these groups had say in an ethnic studies outline and what it should look like. So there is something that's been developed through this process of many, many years. And that was finally, it's now required. So Assembly Bill 101 is the bill. And then starting in 2025 and 26 school year, we must offer students in grades 9 through 12 at least one semester course in ethnic studies. And then starting with students in grades 9 through 12 who are graduating in the 2030, gosh, that sounds so far in the future, they must complete one semester course in ethnic studies in order to graduate from high school. So this is going to become a high school graduation requirement. And that there's a model curriculum that's been developed by the State Board of Education. There's existing ethnic studies courses. There is an existing one. The course has been approved A through G, so students are not going to have one more course added to their load. That is not an A through G approved course. However, boards have the ability to develop an ethnic studies course based on the model curriculum, based on the ethnic studies outline. And so that, as we have been told by Heather Dominguez and Michelle, that work is going to start in the spring. Is how are we going to develop? What are we going to develop? What is it going to look like? La, 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 la. And I'm sure it's going to be, we're not going to rush the process because we do have time for implementation. And, but you know, it's not the same. It's not critical race theory. It's an ethnic studies. And that, this was the part that I loved in the presentation. In the Education Code section 51226.7, if the Commission on State Mandates determines that this act contains costs mandated by the state, reimbursement to local agencies and school district for those costs shall be made pursuant to Part 7. So, Jenny, we'll see if that really happens. Might, you know what I mean? Might be another unfunded mandate. Oh, you're going to have to develop it and pay for the books, and then you're just not going to get the money to do it. So the ethnic studies curriculum addresses institutionalized systems of advantage, addresses the cause of racism and other forms of bigotry, but they deleted out things that included biases and from the input of the different groups involved in developing the framework. The lessons focus on themes of identity, history and movement, social movements. So, you know, when you study the 60s, there you go, that's a social movement. So not that I'm saying that I'm not ridiculing anyway the women's movement or civil rights movement, whatever. But so there's a bunch of ed code referrals on discrimination that are in there. Everything from, you know, skin color to gender, whatever. So if somebody asks you about it, there is a ton of ed code in that presentation. And the unfortunate part is that, as Natalie said, there was a school board member who's also a parent who really opposed her child being subjected to critical race theory, but obviously didn't understand what the attorneys were saying. Right, Natalie? It was kind of heated.
That they're not being exposed to it. So yeah, it was very heated. And again, I think that's just been the politicalization of it and the kind of movements that's going on when you're reading bits and pieces of the media versus actually reading what the laws are. Did you read the Assembly bill? She probably didn't. So yeah, it made for a very interesting presentation.
At one point, one of the attorneys really had to step in. All right, go to your corners kind of thing. So I started with that one first because I think that, you know, we're hearing questions about it. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time. I went to a session called Meeting the Needs of Longtime English Learners. And it was interesting. They call them LTELs, another acronym. And it's, you'll see in the presentation, it really focuses on identifying those students that are at risk of becoming long-term English learners. And what do you do for those targeted, almost like MTS S3, that highest level of intervention? What does that look like? And what they suggested was really looking at not just an EL plan, but part of your EL plan being LTELs. How are you going to do very intensive work with those LTELs that are in danger of becoming LTELs? The 5 areas of focus are educator preparation and professional learning, resources and planning, obviously curriculum and instruction. Again, looking at your data and developing those relationships, engagement, relationships, student focus. And that also includes your parent groups. The parents are a big support. And if they understand what's the process of ELD and all the other components of the English language program, then they're more supportive of it. And part of one of the issues, of course, like we've discussed before, is the English learners, when they have to do ELD or any other kind of interventions, especially in the secondary, that class takes away from an elective that they could be doing, that another A through G course that they could be doing. And so it becomes frustrating, and you want to try to break the cycle before it gets started so that those students have maximum opportunity in the secondary. And in there is a district action checklist for a recommended checklist that I thought was interesting. I'm not going to go through it. Then the San Bernardino City Unified, the next generation engagement. It was interesting. I was thinking it was about, you know, getting parents more involved, right? Woo, let's get those parents involved, especially thinking about the equity committee and having to try to reach out and make sure that we have good engagement from the different stakeholder groups, even though I know that we're not supposed to use the word stakeholder. I'm doing it right now. So anyways, in a synopsis, what this one program they focused really heavily on was basically college and career. They took this program and they started with actually 8th graders, but definitely 9th graders. And they have the students look at a college they really want to go to. So I'm going to pick UCLA to just as a nod to Jordana. And they have the students look at the freshman profile for the incoming class at UCLA. And they look at the SAT, ACT, well, that's not in existence anymore, but the GPA, the extracurriculars, all those items of an admitted student. And that becomes the goal for that student. And what they do is it's almost like backwards mapping, Jordana, where you backwards map not only your course selection, but also your extracurriculars, your community service. It's really detailed oriented, and the plan, almost like an individual learning plan, is put together for that student and is checked every single year. And all the teachers and the counselors talk the same language. Like if a student missed an assignment in the classroom, does this fit your freshman profile? Does this fit within your goal of reaching your freshman profile? So it's checking and supporting that college climate, and that they have this focus within that almost individual learning plan of, okay, what are you going to do to go above and beyond? And they literally allocate hours for students to go above and beyond, maybe using Khan Academy for study prep, taking advantage of resources, whether they're on campus or in the community. And that is put into the mix, Jordana. It's super cool. I know I'm talking to you a lot, but we've had this conversation about in the college health class of what does that look like. And so anyways, it was really, really cool. Steve Wallace was talking to me when we met about the painting of room 101, which is going to become like a college and career hub, so to speak. And I said, hey, I'll send you this presentation and hook you up with Gwen Rogers if you have questions about it, because maybe there are pieces to the overall RIM high school A through G plan that you could use. So I thought that was cool. And then
Wait, if I can just add into that, or not add, just comment on, that's what you're talking about is really exciting, especially if you're working with the students when they're freshmen, because one of the frustrations I had when I was in the classroom dealing with juniors or seniors who are now starting to think about college, juniors, and then realizing that they've already, by what they've done in the past couple of years, had already closed some doors. So oftentimes freshmen are thinking, it's so much in the future, I don't want to think about it now. But if they have goals and they could see that I just have to take this class instead of this class, and that keeps my doors open for these different possible universities, that could be really powerful.
And they have brought that down into middle school so that
Fantastic.
8th graders are having that conversation and walking these steps so that when they do their course selection for high school, they're already having the long-term goal of, I'm going to UCLA. I mean, they may not say that they know they want to go to UCLA because they're going to switch in 10th grade and want to go to USC, but it's just the fact that they are having those conversations, and those conversations are happening at MPH through AVID, but this is more of student-wide population. Every single student participates.
And to, again, add to your point, I could think of a former valedictorian, RIM, who had chosen not to take certain classes junior and senior year, and basically took themselves out of the running for their favorite university because they weren't thinking, they were looking at what was required for those programs rather than recommended. And when you're trying to get into a competitive program, getting counseled early on that really you should be looking at the recommended, because you are competing with other students. So
what's the family engagement part? Well, the families are very involved because these conversations are having with the family, with the individual learning plans. Here's your kid wants to go to UCLA. Here's what the kid needs to do, and here are the above and beyond hours the kid is going to be doing, working on Khan Economy or whatever, to be able to achieve and meet or exceed the freshman profile, which right now for UCLA is really high. So the last one, student voice in decision-making and board governance. Jordana, we're going to co-present this because we were both in this together, but really it's this district, let me see, it's Placer Unified, right? Yes, Placer Union High School District. They had very motivated students wanting to, of course, student board member, and wanting to be more effective as a student board member. And the board and the superintendent said, we know what a student board member has, their rights. They have preferential non-binding voting. They can present, be part of our discussions, all of that. But how do we get these kids engaged in leadership roles on another level? And what they started doing was that the student board member, they started the Student Voices program, which was led by the student board member. And this presentation is in your board docs, but basically what it is that the student board member, the board, and the superintendent agree on a topic that the student board member is going to take to the student population, to this group. It's the Voice Council. It's called the Superintendent Voice Council. So you have to apply as a student, high school student, and say it's 10 students, let's just say. The student board member is the one that leads the discussion. The superintendent oversees, of course, but the topics are voted on by the student board member, the board, and the superintendent. So it's not willy-nilly. And it could be the topic of bullying. It could be the topic of equity. Maybe it's an assignment from the equity committee that would be given to the student board member to take to the superintendent voice council. And the student board member, then they talk about it, they come up with ideas for solutions, the actionable solutions. And that whole thing is then presented by the student board member to the board at a board meeting. And it's really a couple months. So they only do one topic per quarter, basically, because of the process that it takes. But it's solutions-based. And it gets the kids thinking about how to solve a problem, and you have the student buy-in, and it empowers the student board member and the students at the high school level. They feel like they're creating change. That was the big takeaway, is that the students feel empowered and that they are creating lifelong changes that benefit them, that affect them. And
Cindy,
Can I
and I know Zachary's not on here right now, but I do also know he's very passionate about trying to create ways for the student voice to be heard. And I think, getting this information to him in this model might be of interest for everyone to look at, because right now we have a very active and engaged, willing student board member who.
And also this program also builds in training. The student board member goes to the CSBA training in August. They go to Canvas. They go to the CSBA conference. They go to trainings. And then what they do, the current student board member then mentors the last month or so, the new student board member to transition, so that the new student board member isn't like deer caught in the headlights.
One of the unfortunate thing about their position is that it's only 1 year. And so, that creating it but laying the groundwork for the next student board member to have a different map to follow is worth looking at.
Your point, Natalie, is okay. So this was there's 4 different high schools in this district. So there's a student board member from each of those different high schools.
Gotcha.
They were very clear to say this was not part of the ASB program. This was a completely different program. And they really strived to, and they had to interview with the school district, not just be selected among their students. And they really strived to have a diverse representation. Like, it was really interesting hearing the students speak to how they felt like their groups weren't necessarily represented normally within, within the normal, school power structure. So not always having the most academic or the most active students as part of the student board member process, they thought was really important. They wrote a board governance handbook that was written by the students, and that's part of their training. And each year they revise that guidebook. So they have very intensive training that happens over the summer that's required attendance. But along the way, the students put together their own training that they then give to the next group. So it's meant to be a sustained program. And again, like what Cindy said, they're very strategic about what problems they're focused on, and they're actionable. So mentioned specifically with student vaping. Or students needing time to readjust to in-person after virtual. So they were involved from the student perspective on how to be able to make those transitions more effective. And then for vaping, having it be disciplined, not as much discipline, but more of an educated process to deal with student behavior. So they provided a different perspective to administration and how to be able to deal with student issues. It's really exciting to hear.
And the Voice Council, when we talked about, Bill, the Equity Committee and the Long Beach Unified, and how you really have to reach out to the quiet ones, the voice council was, as Jordana said, really composed of students beyond ASB and leadership. It was the quiet ones, the ones that really are not vocal, but they have opinions, they have ideas, and the principals of these schools really helped go out there, because they know their kids, to capture those quiet ones, to bring them into to apply for voice council. And there was a video of one student. He talked about how he was a quiet one, never said even in class, and how he just blossomed in this manner, participating.
Still very shy in terms of presenting
Yes.
to us.
Yes.
It's something you could see he really struggled, but at the same time felt compelled to speak up because he really believed in what he was doing. It's pretty amazing to see.
And that's the thing, is that you really saw, because this was presented, the panel, what were student board members, the student board members from this district. And man, whoa, eloquent, articulate, passionate. I mean, they really came at it as, we helped create something that was lasting to help solve an issue that we are facing. And so it's super, having students be that empowered to be part of that of a process of solving issues in a district is pretty amazing.
But adding to it, one of the things that was interesting that one of the student board members mentioned is, they're talking about mentioned the late start bill, and how the students, and talking to the students about it, said, it sounds good to sleep in, but it started resonating with us, all these things we wouldn't be able to do if school started later. So wanting to have more of a voice, but having the district basically saying, that's not coming from us, that's coming from the state. But bringing that up specifically and having them understood what they have power over and what they don't have power over.
But it was struck in a structured way, in a positive way, and it was, here's the agreed upon issue that's going to be presented, and they have that one meeting. Then the next one is solutions based, and then the student board member presents. So it's over the course of several months that this process takes place. And it's not like a ton of meetings. The voice council does not meet several times a week or a month even. And so there you go.
She just stops. She forces herself to stop herself. Anybody have any other questions or comments on Cindy's?
Jordana and I left like super excited.
Yeah.
Also knowing how Zach is just, this would be a huge undertaking to try and establish such a program, but we've had such great student board members lately, and to really help them be able to do what they wish to do and being more involved with the district.
And then we also it becomes almost a teaching program, almost, to help our students go into public service, or maybe go in to be our next elected officials at the state or federal government. It lays the groundwork for leadership and real change, because they are promoting change. So that's the other takeaway, is that this is something that can actually be a teachable program, hands-on teachable program.
Absolutely. Okay, for mine that I attended, I'm going to be brief on some and go into more detail on others. One of them that was a very interesting discussion was school personnel misconduct, strategies for prevention, investigation, and response. And this is an area that isn't covered in this type of detail in our trainings that we do. So I found it really fascinating, and I am somewhat involved in an organization that's beginning to set up tracking for sexual misconduct in in sports. And now the talk was about it occurring within the school districts, and with personnel being tracked on this. I'm very surprised to know that there is no tracking of this, unless there is a actual legal case or conviction where they will be flagged in a live scan. There is no other way to know if multiple allegations have been made against a teacher in another district. And so the company or the organization that was discussing it was called Sesame, and they're really working on creating a national database and getting states to buy in to including teacher or staff, all personnel misconduct into this system, so that future employers, once they've left that district or removed from that district, are able to know something about this. This is just imperative to protecting our children. And it was shocking to me that it does not occur. Because again, unless you're going to get popped on a live scan, there's no way to know what your past has been. And so while they're trying to create that, they really talked about what can a district actually do. And they, in their research, have found it also shockingly common for reference checks to never be done on school personnel. And that is the place that you're able to catch previous misconduct potentially, that a lot of districts just completely miss altogether. And I don't know I know there are only certain things that a prior employer is allowed to disclose, but one of those questions is, would you hire them? Are they eligible for rehire? Would you hire them again? And if they say no, there's a huge red flag there. And if a district isn't even calling to ask that, they're not doing their due diligence in order to protect students. Obviously, many things were discussed in regards to underreporting of it, the fact that it may be, common knowledge, or everybody knows that that's, something's going on with that teacher, or something's going on with that teacher and that student, and that it's never formally reported. And that one of the women on this was a victim herself and had been abused by a teacher that had abused 14 other students, and that she knew of, that multiple people knew of, but it was never formally addressed by the district because it was never formally submitted to the district. And I know the hesitation of reporting, and where fears come in with that, and you don't want to be accused of making a false report or whatever. But I just highly encourage, students, parents, other faculty members, anyone, that if there is a suspicion, it needs to be reported, and then the proper investigation will be done. And how you respond to the alleged adult, and how you respond to the student is also very important too. And oftentimes the students aren't responded to or aren't cared for. It's just discipline, or going to the adult and following the procedures for what discipline, investigation, yada yada looks like, where the student sometimes gets missed. And it's been the pattern of other districts to just say, well, the problem's removed, and not recognize that there's just this path of destruction that's been left that nobody's coming in to kind of clean up and care for. Obviously, it doesn't only affect the student, but all of the other students that have been exposed to that teacher or that student, other professionals that have been exposed to that teacher, the reputation of education in general. You've seen this spread in areas such as the Catholic Church or gymnastics, or and it leaves a very negative taste in everyone's mouth, obviously, because the follow-up after that doesn't occur. So really fascinating. I mean, shocking how I guess unsophisticated our systems are for tracking previous claims of misconduct or anything like that. So any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, Natalie, I'm in not the same situations, but kind of in the same situations. Students have said that they're fearful of going to the principal and having a conversation about behavior in the classroom because of potential retaliation and by the staff person, and maybe their grade will, maybe other microaggressions, whatever. And so did they talk about that as part of one of the underreportings as well, is that students really don't want to speak up because they fear retribution?
Absolutely. And that's why abuse victims in general don't speak up, or a portion of why they don't speak up. That being said, I think if there is an education piece that goes to all students or all parents, everyone, that goes to everyone, that says, these are how we will protect you if you do report, there would be more willingness to do that if there was the trust and the belief in a system in place, knowing this is how I will be protected if I report this, whether it pans out to be a false or true allegation. Removing a student from a class because that will make them feel safer to report and not feel like there's a potential consequence is an option that they laid out. And to say, if you're going to make an allegation, or if you're making a report about poor behavior and you're truly afraid that there will be retaliation from it, then we'll protect you by keeping you away from that person, essentially. Easier to do in larger districts, probably, if you only have one teacher who teaches that one subject and that's the one that you need, obviously there are challenges to that, but then there would be a burden upon us or administration and the principal to ensure that, well, suddenly that student's getting really bad grades and that was after they made this allegation. What's going on with that? Some more investigation requires that protection of this student. And so it's not only getting the student mental health services afterwards, or ensuring that their family and home life is supporting them the way they need to, but also making sure that they're still going to be set up for academic success afterwards, and that an allegation or report doesn't deter them off that path.
Natalie, it seems like there's a number of other issues too. For just you touched on it very briefly there, the false allegations. So if you're going to try to track, somebody's had allegations, but how do you track, was it a legit or a false allegation? Also, is there tracking for victims? That's gonna, how are you gonna follow up to see that like you touched on, how are you gonna see that the victim gets help? Seems like we have a fairly good investigation tool for our district. I'm not sure how our system is set up for ongoing care of victims. But also, again, how do you make sure that we're not passing on information about a false allegation?
Well, and how do we know that a false allegation is a true false allegation? There are so many unknowns in situations like this. But just a simple tracking gets you started somewhere. And this Sesame is they've been around for 20 years and still are at ground zero in creating these things.
And how do you get past the ones you were touching on where several people knew all about this? That several, that's the thing. Reporting's got to come from more people than just in a case like that.
And as a mandated reporter, you are required to report. So next
Right.
is, if I know you knew and you didn't report it, you are now responsible too.
Right.
And there are investigations into that, consequences, and a response that's required there too. Sometimes it might just be more education. Sometimes it might be actually punishable.
So what I'd be interested in knowing what we have to help educate our educators
Mhm.
to help protect victims.
Right. Right. And you know, I don't know that Heather is not on here today. But a wonderful question for her when it comes to staff training and education and what is provided to them on this. Dana, you might be able to speak to it from your experience as an educator. If you were provided kind of tools, knowledge, or education about how to respond and react to a report or allegation.
Something that's hit on when you're going through your credentialing program. And basically it's one of those things that as a teacher, you would loop other individuals in. So this is at the high school. I don't know for like elementary where there isn't a dedicated, counseling office and the like. But yeah, depending on the urgency, raising flags immediately, involving law enforcement is needed. There were some things that I had to deal, had to get involved with. But it's not, from my experience, but frankly, I was there with different administration. It wasn't something that was like discussed on a regular basis in staff meetings in terms of providing continual, like, this is what you need to do. But I think every single adult who's in touch with students, and not in touch, but involved with students on the school sites are mindful of their mandatory reporter status.
Yeah.
And and the responsibility that goes along with it.
Repeat that, Jordana. What
was that?
Repeat what you just said.
Every adult on campus, every staff member is aware of their mandatory, who is a mandatory reporter is aware of the obligations involved. However, like school districts down the hill will have departments that you'd be able to call in to deal with situations. This is one of those things that our counselors have to deal with a lot already. And it's one of those things that I found them to be excellent in making, crisis situations a priority. Not to mention our administrators, when I was there, Derek Swim and also Dave Nygren, and I mean, just they were very aware of the need to be able to deal with such matters urgently and with care. But it's something that isn't necessarily explicitly provided as training on a regular basis.
So that I would think that there'd be some value in us having our leadership develop and make sure that there is some kind of annual training on that.
I do believe we have annual mandated reporter training.
And we
Yes.
do have, actually thinking about it, there's training, online training that we had to do on a regular basis that we would be, just to go through and do the watch the video, read the material, and click, answer questions. I don't know that wasn't around when I first started teaching, but when I went back into the classroom recently, there are like Jenny just mentioned, there are annually several topics that I know, like with bloodborne pathogens and also sexual harassment and also mandatory reporting, student safety. Those are things that I know are continually addressed. Usually in the past, it's been at the beginning of the year. I imagine that's still the case.
But sometimes just something being assigned, it's not as personal as somebody standing up there and reminding us. I think because even Natalie touched on it in a comment she made, that there's some hesitancy of reporting, and she's a professional in the business. And people hesitate at reporting because they're afraid somebody's going to get hurt by it. And yet we don't have an option to try to decide, are we going to or not? And Jenny, I wouldn't mind you chiming in here. It'd be helpful to know some of how we address some of those topics and have it go beyond just an assignment.
Yeah, we do have, it's mostly done through our personnel department, but it's a collaboration of, depending on the classification of employee, there's probably a good 12 mandated trainings assigned to the each year to our staff. Some are specific to certificated, some are specific to managers, and some are specific to your different work classifications like custodial, mechanics, and behind the bus training. So each manager will work individually with the personnel, assistant super personnel, and then along with our risk management to kind of see, okay, what does my department specifically need? I'm going to use Jim and his maintenance crew as an example. They need items that are on top of mandated reporters. They are mandated reporters, so they get the suicide prevention, the sexual harassment, and the mandated reporters and those. But in addition, they may get hazardous waste and proper lifting, forklift certification. So by classification, we have a grid that is, if you're a teacher, it's XYZ, and it's either by ed code or by OSHA requirements. Some is just best practices, that our attorneys may recommend. And then some are, OSHA, ed code, and some are the labor laws. So we have maybe 3 or 4 areas that we need to stay in compliance with. I know CWA does the suicide prevention trainings, and they may have additional ones for their special ed department. So we are lucky enough with our JPA. They offer some grids on, it's almost like a flow chart. If you're this classification, you're mandated to do, these 10, and we recommend you do these 4. What we would do is we would meet with personnel in my department annually and really have that decided by Todd at the time on, how are we going to assign it and what's going to be an in-person training, what's going to be assigned through, a computer, like a PowerPoint type option. And then we monitor that, we set a due date, and then each principal or each manager actually gets a report of what employees have complied with their testing and what haven't. And I think that's where our struggle is right now. We had a little bit of disconnect on how we assigned trainings this year, where we're going to stagger them a little bit because it got a little bit overwhelming for some staff that they got 12 assignments all at once. But there's some that within 8 weeks of school, we have to have certain ones completed by, and it's really it's one of our best defenses. And I think Natalie hit on it on number 1, did we do our due diligence in training someone that on what they're supposed to do? And if they did the training, if they still didn't comply with the rules, then that's an area that we can defend the district on, is that we did everything we could and this person still, did, like they said, did something wrong. So our struggle probably is on, just to be honest, is being able to have the time to follow it up, and each manager with their crew, we do have a tough time getting the participation up, and but it is in everyone's best interest, especially if you hold a credential, to do what you're mandated, the mandated trainings, because it can actually impact someone's credential at that time. So, we've done some negotiations this year to try to find days to allow people more time to do the trainings. And next year we're going to, it looks like, and it's a question for Heather, but I think we're going to build in some training time on our PD days to not have it be so overwhelming. Because we have some that are a 15-minute you can do on a quick break, and some are 2 hours.
Right.
So
thank you, Jenny. That's helpful. I think my final thing I want to say on this topic in general is that a reporter is not obligated to investigate. You don't have to investigate first. You don't have to find out the truth before you report. You report, someone else does the investigation. Just do what your job is in it, and you can go to sleep peacefully and happily. Okay, another one I did was on CIF, the role of education-based athletics after COVID. A little premature because we're not after COVID, we're still right in the middle of COVID. But nonetheless, we talked about it. Ron Nosetti, who's the executive director of CIF, was the presenter on it. And I've talked ad nauseum about the role athletics plays in the health and wellness of our students, and that when it comes to both mental health, physical health, being engaged in the community, connectivity, a feeling and sense of pride and purpose, athletics is a great place to be able to do that. One of the consequences that they're seeing statewide from COVID is that a lot of the 7th and 8th graders were not having opportunities to do athletics in clubs things or in recreational things. And so getting the buy-in again for, what will be freshmen or people to restart athletics has been a challenge for some districts. And it's interesting, Dr. Rios, who we all watched, he was one of the what's the right word?
Speakers.
Big speakers.
Keynote speaker, keynote.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. He just highlighted the importance of the connectivity and how having, that relationship between, in his case, it was the teacher and him, but I've seen it over and over again with a coach and a student, and how powerful that is, and that is healing, is guiding, is motivation to come to school for many people who aren't academically driven. That being athletically driven and knowing you have a coach there or a team there who's supporting you and counting on you gets you going. But again, because there's fewer access to club sports, maybe because of people's finances these days, or because of the fact that they were closed, or again, recreational sports in the community, a lot of those programs in other communities died because their funding sources went away. People, once they closed, it was like we kind of forgot about them. And they were talking about having education-based athletics in middle school, in 7th and 8th grade. And that, having teams that can be driven by the district to provide those opportunities for students will help just their lives and filter them into high school athletics and hopefully college athletics and beyond. So it was a good presentation. It was similar to the one he did 2 years ago, but with the twist of some of the consequences that COVID has had on athletics, and what the future of that will be is unknown. Olympics is coming up soon, and there's still talk of, is it going to happen? Is it not? You see a lot of major league or national teams, are canceling games and aren't as prominent as they once were. And it's sad because it's a source of joy for many people, and again, this purpose for many students. So their just desire from CIF is that school boards continue to advocate for the funding that sports needs in order to keep them in our schools for our kids.
I know that, like, for my own daughter, Kira, having ADHD, being able to play soccer, being able to do cross country and track, but especially soccer, it was not only just, the pride in being part of a team for a common purpose, but it was also necessary for her to have that physical release from being in class from 7 to 2. Having that physical relief allowed her to go back to do her homework. She
Made
needed,
her a better student.
they need to decompress. ADHD kids really need that ability, that time to decompress in some manner. And for her, it was a need. It's like when she made me angry, I was told by the doctor, do not ground her by taking away soccer. That would be the worst thing you could do. Don't do that. Find some other way of discipline, but don't do that, because she won't be able to function. She will physically not be able to do her homework. And so it's also it's health, getting kids active, it's so important.
It really is. So I again attended critical race theory and ethnic studies. No need to cover it. And then the mental wellness center tiered approach. It was called using the Family Resource Center model to promote wellness and mental health at school sites. This was Long Beach Unified School District. I know, Cindy, you had a question about their funding. And so again, it's LCAP funding. They didn't go into great detail about how they do it. My understanding, and it was presented by a superintendent, a principal, and 2 members of the mental health team. What I liked about it is they have this tiered approach to identifying their students. Anybody can submit a ticket, similar to what we do with Jim in regards to getting something fixed at a school site, right? So they submit a ticket to the mental health center for the student, and every staff has access to this. The students can also do it themselves, though they said they get very few referrals that are student driven, I guess, in that way. It tends to be staff driven. And as soon as they go there, then someone calls, they talk to the student, talk to the family to determine what the needs are. But they cover this department covers all their staff training for mental health, family training. So every week they have 3 family groups where it's essentially free group therapy for the families, and then they have individual therapy and/or so it's very different from what our counselors are doing at our site. Our counselors are school counselors. These are psychologists, MFTs, AMFTs, or marriage and family therapists, licensed clinical social workers. They're not academic based counselors, which is what we have at the high school and middle school. Now, I know they have to play both roles because they do have students that will come into them for mental health or emotional needs. And though that isn't their special training, I'm sure they're very sensitive. They're skilled in some of what students' needs are, but they're not doing therapy with them. That's not their role. And that's not what their training is. So this program is fully, the schools, the psychologists, or marriage and family licensed clinical social workers. So they have each of their school site pay every year out of their school site LCAP funds to the overall wellness center. So, or resource center is what they call it. So their resource center, for example, like, I'm terrible at math and not going to do these numbers, but hypothetically, it costs $300,000 to run it for a year, right? And each school site pays a portion of that from their school site funds. Questions, comments, concerns about that?
No, just that Michelle and I, a couple years ago, we went to several wellness center workshops to find out how they were set up and all that other. And that was one thing that, again, we walked away going, wow, okay, where would we get the money out of our budget to be able to fund a very synchronized wellness program incorporating all schools, including elementary? And
I think that proposing that to the school site councils, proposing that to the principals, allowing the principals to take that down to their teachers and they've all said that they want a counselor on site. They've all said it. This is an opportunity. This is a way to pay for it, to have a entire center dedicated to the mental health of the students and their needs. This is an option. Is it something that our site wants?
It might be worthwhile also to look at partnering like with Room Family Services or with Mountain Counseling. In that I know that there's been times where they have had funding and they're looking for programs. I mean, there's, staffing ends up being an issue for them, but that might be more long-term, having strategic discussions with those organizations to be able to provide those services.
Mm-hmm. What they say is that the relief that the site feels because of them paying for that program, it is well worth the money that they know that they're going to invest every year on. So they get their funding and they go, this 30,000 or this 50,000 is going to that, because that helps our students, that helps our teachers, that helps our staff. Like, we know that those needs are taken care of, because we all know that when children, adults too, are struggling with mental health issues, it comes along with more behavior issues. It comes along with more academic issues. A lot of resources and time are being pulled away to care for these students, and we're not actually doing it in the most effective way. A lot of times it pans out, not at all sites, not always, but as discipline. And that's not what's required. You have to get to the core of what's actually going on with these little students. And a lot of times it's not that they're not getting the mental health services they need. So they see such a relief in decrease in behavior issues and discipline issues as a result of having this program, and more family engagement. Right? Because now you have somebody or a program who's dedicated to getting your family involved in these situations with more high needing of love students. And it's not, maybe a teacher who's responsible of tracking down this parent after they're, all the time and not getting responses. It's somebody else's job to do that. Once they get engaged, once they feel empowered, once they feel connected, once they have tools to know how to help their kid, they're going to be more involved in a site level or in an engagement with the teacher level too.
So was the suggestion was maybe utilizing site funds and being written into the school plan, so site council oversees and monitors that, and that.
Correct.
Gotcha. I mean, okay, got it.
It's a option for going
no,
stop meeting that.
No, that's thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
Like how I mean, the unfortunate part is when a school has many different needs competing, how, you know what I'm saying? It's like, but you're right. It takes, this is important to us. This is the first thing that's funded.
And that's what they do. I mean, that's what they have, all sites have agreed to do, and it seems to be working out for them.
Sounds like something worth sharing, at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, yeah. Because like you say, mental health affects everything. And clearly student behavior, participation, attendance, educational, everything is affected by mental health. So I'm sure every campus is concerned about it.
And student safety, the safety of other students. I mean, we could go on and on. The safety of the classroom and the environment is dependent on everybody having a certain level of mental stability too. Why wouldn't just to me, it touches so many different areas and could potentially create a more a stable environment at the school site. it's hard to argue against that in my mind. But again, I'm a psychologist sitting here telling you that, they might be like, I need a copier to work, and I don't care. If the copier doesn't work, it doesn't matter, none of it. So I don't know.
I'm with you, Natalie. I'm with you.
I've also dealt with those copiers at LAE, and those ruin my mental health. So
Yes, they do.
who knows? Well, so that ends, the ones I wanted to report out. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
Natalie, I just wanted to go back to something, and I know that, and it is on critical race theory, and I have a gentleman that I have high regard for. He's a Black African-American pastor, Tony Evans. He's an author. He's just well known across the country, and he says CRT has been convoluted by a number of things. And the thing that I think gets missed in some of these presentations, which it's correct. CRT was a legal course taught in law school, still is. However, CRT now has become convoluted by the things that have happened in recent years, including 1619 Project, which Cindy mentioned, including even Black Lives Matter, including even things that continue that have turned it in. When people are talking CRT, they're really no longer talking that course in the legal, and that's why you have so many people then in that meeting, I'm sure, that were upset because parents are reacting to lessons and things that are being taught that go way beyond, quote, technical CRT. And I think we have to be careful when we try to respond and say, oh, well, we're not teaching CRT, when that's really not what people are talking about. They're talking about these much broader, bigger, unfortunately hostile issues. And we need to be sensitive to that too. So I just had to make that comment. Thanks.
No, we do. But part of our job as a school board is to give them information as well to try and try to, I guess, for lack of a better word, present them with information that counters misinformation and try to redirect the conversation. However, a lot of people now, through media, through other means of information, have come to a decision on what it is. And so we can only, Natalie, I think it was Natalie said it, or about you not going down a path of arguing, but listening, just giving information, but not really going into the arguments and the emotions of it, because there are a lot of people that do have made a decision on what it is. And go ahead.
To add to that, to your point and to Bill's point, I've had some people reach out to me regarding the now being revised again math framework, and concerned about CRT being involved in the math framework, where, yeah, that's not part of law school curriculum. That's not, so I think that, what my approach has been with folks stating that concern is to ask more about, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And try to better understand it. And I think at this point, there's I think a lack of understanding from the folks who are trying to put together various curriculum at the state level and what they're trying to accomplish, and folks who are concerned about what their students might be being taught. And there's a lack of communication that's coming out of the terms that are being used and the buzzwords. And that's where I think that we have, like what Bill had said, I want to be careful about being dismissive of folks.
Exactly.
And that's my concern. That's my concern.
That's why we have to be listening to them. And you're right, asking the questions of what is it that you're actually concerned about? Give me details, because it gives us more information, so that when we go, say, to start the ethnic studies curriculum, that we're hearing what people's concerns are, and we're addressing those concerns along the way, and we're transparent and we're informative, and we keep educating, because that's our job, educating everybody as to every single part of the process, and making sure that when it's their turn, parents are part of the process, community members are part of the process. And so that way you are combating the misinformation with information that is in real time as we go through the ethnic studies part. And I don't ever want to be dismissive of somebody's what their exactly where their position is, even if I agree or don't agree with it. You have to be respectful at least where they're at.
All right, so I believe that wraps up our discussion of CSBA conference report. Going back to the agenda, 9.2, we did remove from the calendar. 9.3, Equity and Social Justice Committee update report. Trustee Mellinger.
Well, thank you. So we are actually getting ready for our very first meeting of the subcommittee, which will be on January 18th at 5:30. We've had a little bit of shifting going on within the people in the committee, but also I think I hope I reported last time that Dr. White has already started meeting with our principals, and we're already we're moving through the process. And I know that I still have a concern that we find some of our Hispanic alumni. So we've established a portal for people to give us names of alumni, because one of the things we'll be doing is listening session with alumni. Like Cindy and I were chatting earlier, the quiet people. We need to find some of them. And so even though they're not technically on the committee, we're still looking for people that can be a part of conversation. And so each of you, anybody watching this, can actually give us names of people that are alumni that may have experiences that would be beneficial for us to hear from.
Do they need to be living in our area? Do they have to be local at this point?
No.
No, in fact, because we can do listening. That's the beauty now of what we've learned in the last few years. We can do listening through Zoom, through other one-on-one methods and all. So we're looking at really just building the base of names and contact information. And so that's in that Excel folder in the equity folder.
So please, we all have the ability that the board members to go in and add
yes
name and a contact information. So as you please reach out to alumni, broad spectrum in age. It could be a recent graduate as well as one that's 50 years ago, and put that and ask, and then put it on the spreadsheet.
Yes. So that's I think for me and for Cindy, we're really concerned that we build that base right now and build some more people into that we can then have in listening sessions. And so our first meeting, January 18th, 5:30. So we'll be reporting about that after we have that session. Anything to add, Cindy? Okay, thank you.
You said it all, Bill. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie.
10.0 future meeting dates. Regular board meeting, January 20th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. Location is to be determined, and it says here to determine if the January 20th meeting will be held in person or virtual. I would like to start the kind of discussion on that. As Jordan highlighted, the reason that this had to go virtual is because there was a confirmed positive case amongst people who belong in this meeting. And so my personal preference is to do it in person, unless at that time there is another positive confirmed case amongst us. And then we would have to transition to virtual again. Do other people have thoughts or opinions about that? I saw a thumbs up from Cindy. I see a thumbs up from Bill and Dana and Jordan. You're on a different screen, but can I get a thumbs up now? If you have it, okay. So
I would
if
add,
we-
Natalie, that
Yes.
we had others of us that were possibly positive as well. So it was a much bigger. It was not about what was being stated earlier. It was clearly about positive test results.
Yeah, there are positive cases here and direct exposure here amongst people that needed to be in this meeting. And so that is why it was done this way. So we will do that January 20th meeting in person unless we remain in that situation. It should be the case based off of dates and times that we know positive cases last for, that we should all be clear by then, hopefully. So fingers crossed. Regular board meeting February 17th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. Again, to be determined. I think that if we stick with that, any way that we can do in person, that is what we want to do. If there are positive cases amongst people that must be in this meeting, that will change. Per California state mandate, masks are required to be worn properly by fully covering your nose and mouth on all K-12 campuses while indoors. Again, this board meeting is occurring while we are all in our private homes or offices, and that's why we do not have masks on. 11.1, adjournment.
So
Can I get a motion? Bill, in a second.
Cindy,
Any discussion required?
Just that our president did a very good job of running the meeting.
I appreciate you all. Thank you. And we're going to do our vote individually. So if Bill, you would like to begin.
Natalie, state the time, please.
Don't we have to do the vote first?
Usually, no, you don't. Usually we try to say it beforehand. Go ahead.
Okay. So the meeting's adjourned at 7:52.
I think you were right, Natalie, in going with the vote first. Bill Mellinger, trustee area 1, aye.
Hannah Redland, area 2, aye.
Cindy Gardner, trustee area 3, aye.
Natalie Lindeman, trustee area 4, aye.
Jordan Zarate, trustee area 5, aye.
Meeting is adjourned by unanimous vote. And the meeting's adjourned at 7:53. Or no, it's not. It was at 7:52.